Hello, friends of Bill W. and other friends. You have landed on Sober Speak. My name is John M. I am an alcoholic. We are glad you are all here, especially newcomers. Newcomers, that is, both to recovery and newcomers to this podcast, Sober Speak. In our episode today, you're going to hear from Jake S. He is going to take us on the dark path that he had to endure in order to get where he had to get. I'm calling this episode, He Crossed That Line. And many of you will be able to relate to that. He was not expecting to cross the line. He was not planning to cross the line. But he did cross that line. And he's going to tell us about his journey. This is a podcast about recovery centered around the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. Sober Speak is for those who have not made it into recovery, those who are in recovery, and those who got sober a long time ago. So consider Sober Speak, if you will, your meeting between meetings. If you're enjoying the podcast or just want to reach out to us, we would love to hear from you. Reach out to us at feedback@soberspeak.com. Just a couple of program notes real quick. We are now on Spotify and iHeartRadio for those of you who like to use those apps. And please remember, we do not speak for any 12-step community. We represent only ourselves. We are here to share our experience, strength, and hope with those who wish to come along for the ride. Take what you want and leave the rest at the curb. But that's enough of that. Let's dive into this episode. Okay, everybody, and we are here at another episode of Sober Speak. I'm sitting here with my new friend, Jake S.
Very nice.
Jake S. was referred to me from a mutual friend of ours, Gavin, who has been on the podcast already, and I'm glad Jake was able to come by, and we're so glad he's here. All right, so, you know, I've read all these, not all, I've read several interview type of articles before. They always say, research your guests to the nth degree so you'll know everything about them so you're as prepared as you can be.
Sure.
I'm sitting here with my paper regarding Jake, and all it says
totally
on it
blank.
is Jake, and it's today.
Yeah.
Which means I really know nothing about Jake.
Right.
And I kind of like it this way. We, in fact, had a conversation before he came out, before you came out. I'll just talk to you.
Sure.
And we kind of avoided telling each other about each other. We knew there's this podcast here, and I just wanted to get you out here and record your story. So, with that being said, let's just start here. I know that you're. Well, let's talk about how you found out about Sober Speak, and then I also want to talk a little bit. I believe you're going on a little getaway here real soon. And anything you want to say about that, you can.
Sure.
Okay.
So I heard Gavin D on your podcast, and it's really a beautiful thing, actually, because Gavin is a colleague of mine. We work in the same industry. We do the same thing, more or less. And I have known him for 8 years, for as long as I've been in the business, and almost as long as he's been in the area that we live in. And when I heard him do this, and I saw that he did it, and I listened to it, it's really interesting because he knew that I was sober, quote unquote.
And by the way, just to kind of identify yourself,
sure.
Why don't you give everybody your sobriety date so they know?
Jake, I'm an alcoholic and drug addict, and my date is December 20th, 2011.
Okay.
So, he knew that I had stopped drinking, and I really don't say anything outside of that. A couple people that in the workplace kind of know a little bit, but pretty much most people now, because it's been 8 years and there's a lot of turnover, just know that I don't drink. He knew because he saw me when I first started there, young buck, and has seen me now. He knew that there was a clear line of delineation.
Something happened.
Right. And he had asked me a couple questions about it before, and I didn't really think much of it. But the interesting thing is that I have been watching his journey, not knowing what he's been doing. And I've very clearly seen the change in him. And, I'll stop him every once in a while and just say, man, you look great. You seem great. You sound great. And in fact, I'm very close with his boss. And I've had several conversations with him. I don't know how much he even knows just about this is a different guy. This is, and all in great ways. All the great stuff that he did before is still there, but this is a guy who's had a transformation, is basically what I saw. And I didn't really know. Anyways, hear the podcast, was just riveted by it, contacted him, and told him, I don't know if you know, but I'm sober via the program, have been since 2011. And I just want you to know that your story helped me in my daily reprieve. And so really the beautiful thing about this is that what his response to me was, I didn't know that you got sober through the program, and I had always admired how you just seemed to shut it off. Right. And so isn't it amazing, how both of us were going through our journeys, knowing that each other were going through a journey, but both of us had really done it in a very similar way, and I say all that to say that was one of the reasons that inspired me to do this, is because had I known back then, maybe if I had been open to showing myself a little bit more, who knows, but that it taught me a really important lesson, which has brought me here to you today. And really, kick something off in me to be willing to be more open,
more transparent.
Yeah.
Right, vulnerable, so to speak.
Yeah, sure,
right?
sure.
To see if other people can benefit from them, right? And just so the audience knows, with all the guests that I have in, and I've never really talked about this before, but I always pray for three things at the beginning of this podcast. Number one is that we may grow closer to each other and experience that. Number two, that we may grow closer to God. And number three, that we can lay down something on tape here that, in essence, can help other people. And so I'm glad you came here and are vulnerable enough to do that.
Yeah, and let me also say that I don't know if I would have reached out to you had it not been so clear through you doing that podcast with Gavin that you are open to all different ways of, however you want to pin it down, sobriety, spirituality. I don't know how exactly you would describe it, but I could clearly see, look, it's a reality. There's some people in this walk that think it needs to be one way, and I don't think you and I agree with that.
No. In fact, the AA literature really points that out.
Yeah.
In spades. I mean, and many times, and like I said to Gavin, I know that, for me personally, I've been living this way of life when I say this way of life, the AA, Alcoholics Anonymous way of life for a long time. And so, I breathe it, I live it, it's the thing for me. But if somebody can get sober in another way, God bless them, man.
Please,
I'm way behind that.
Yeah, me too.
All right, so let's talk about Jake S. here a little bit. Then.
Yeah.
All right, so I don't know exactly where to start with you. I mean, when did you grow up here in this area?
I did, yeah, okay. I did.
And when I say this area, this is the Dallas area, by the way.
Yeah, DFW.
Yeah. So when did you start? Was there anything that you want to cover over the first part of your life that kind of contributed to where you are today?
Yeah, we probably should, and I'll try to keep it tight. But yeah, I grew up, suburban, North Texas, and pretty much as far as I can remember, my house was a war zone. And those are terms that my parents have used to describe it now as well. And basically,
when you say a war zone, you mean like a physical war zone or verbal?
No, the physical violence was there in a way. No one, my dad certainly never laid a hand on my mother, but there were objects thrown. Gotcha. And mainly just incredibly the verbal and emotional drama was incredibly intense. I was the oldest child.
Out of how many?
Out of two, me and my younger sister. And I don't know why. Now we know we were all going through our own demons, but everything that went on between my parents just seemed to, soak right into me. And I saw it all, I heard it all, and I still don't really know whether it was they thought that I wouldn't comprehend it or wouldn't understand what was going on, or that, and what I think it is that they were just so deep in it that they hadn't considered how it might affect me. So the point of all that is that early on in my life, I felt things very deeply, very emotionally. I carried a burden of their relationship that, not that I thought I could fix it or anything like that, but I walked with the burden of what's going to happen next.
On eggshells.
Yeah, on eggshells, absolutely. And through that, I knew that I couldn't have described it to you that way at the time, but I knew in a way that I had a hole here that was not being filled through anything in my life as a child. And that moved into adolescence as well. My parents did divorce, and I was 12, 13 when that happened. Okay. And I know a lot of people do struggle with the actual act of the divorce. For me, the marriage was much harder than the divorce. Now, what the divorce did is it enabled my acting out. Because different houses,
this.
Yes,
Right, you're right.
Different houses,
different set of rules.
Yeah, and at a certain point, I think both of them realized I wasn't going to follow them, so there weren't really a lot of rules. It was kind of all, from about the time they got divorced on to, college, I guess. It was kind of strung together how to raise Jake
right.
through a lot of trial and error. And a lot
was your sister as difficult to handle as you, or were you kind of the wild child?
Yeah, it's really interesting actually. When we were young, and kind of going back to what I was saying about me bearing the brunt of it, my sister had undiagnosed ADHD, which in the 90s, was kind of the forefront for that in a lot of ways. And so she was a wild child, literally, when we were young.
Right.
Running out the front door of the house naked, sprinting like a gazelle 3 miles before my parents could find her, type of stuff. Anyways, they eventually got the ADD thing figured out. And actually, I was the quiet, introverted, reader over athletic one as a kid, kind of going back to how all that emotion weighed on me, that was going on between my parents. It was really dark stuff. The trials of their marriage being verbalized was really, really, it was like, Kramer versus Kramer is a fairy tale versus this, Anyways, my sister actually kind of started to, about the time she was medicated, she started to see kind of my path, and she didn't want my path. And so she really, grounded herself in church and friends and the family that, we could depend on emotionally. And she made a very conscious decision that she lived with and is living with to this day, to not go the way that I went, which is a pretty incredible thing.
Yeah, I've said this before. I have met people before that they said, they were in high school, they started hanging around with the wrong people, they gave their life to the Lord, and then they started in the right direction. And I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
I wish
Yeah.
it's like I could have had a V8. I wish I'd done that,
Yeah.
So that's great. Your sister did that.
Yeah, well, and she had a really great deterrent.
Yeah, yeah.
She had a really good deterrent. Every time I would bump my head up against something, whether it be, jail, in trouble at school, car crash, and there was a lot of them, she would look at that and go, that doesn't seem very fun, And look, I certainly had warning signs too, but I think, that's kind of proof in the pudding of I'm an alcoholic and she's not. It's because she was able to go, that's not for me, and well, we can get into all that.
I understand. All right, so let's get into some of that. So it sounded like you said there was jail, crashes, whatever.
Yeah.
Anything from that particular time stand out to you that you want to share, or do you want to go into your?
Really, just that pretty much right around the time that my parents split, and we split the households as well. I ended up having to go live with my dad almost immediately after that because my mom couldn't handle me. She was going back to work after not working for 13 years. She was really sick my whole life, which we'll get into. She had a degenerative heart problem that led to a heart transplant a few years ago. Wow. And she couldn't, we could not be in the same room. So I went to live with my dad. My sister stayed with my mom. And pretty much from that time, that's where drugs and alcohol started. Okay. And there really was no limit on any of it. Yeah. There was one, which we'll get into, but pretty much anything you could think of that a 12 to 16-year-old could get their hands on, I was in it whenever I could. And there were, like I said, minor repercussions throughout all of that. A parent finds something, or I get in a little run-in with the police. One, I think like 2 or 3 first day of summers in a row, I ended up either in a run-in with the cops or in the hospital. And so I would get grounded on the first day of summer, like three summers in a row. And one of them, in fact, ended with me in the hospital. And before they could even treat my wounds, my dad was yelling to get me drug tested, and rightfully so, because drugs were the reason I was in that predicament. But so through all of that, I somehow managed to get decent grades, good grades, because I had a lot of extracurricular stuff that gave me free 100s, but I excelled in music and acting, did both of those things high or drunk many times, and seemed to have no issues with them. I'm sure everyone else just resented me for all of that. It was just kind of a roller coaster that seemed to somewhat stay on the tracks, except for having a few come to Jesus's with my parents up until I left for college.
Right.
Yeah.
So where'd you go to? So you went to college here in the Texas?
I did. I went to TCU.
Okay.
Yeah, I went to TCU, and just a small sidebar on that. That was a really interesting experience for me because I grew up in East Richardson, which, if anyone knows the area, West Richardson is predominantly Caucasian and pretty standard middle to upper middle class. And East Richardson is kind of this melting pot, where you're not going to get much over 25% at Berkner, where I went to high school, of any ethnicity. So I'm very thankful for that, because, I got to, experience all sorts of cultures were very normal to me. And there wasn't really my dad was probably one of the, wealthier, quote unquote, parents that I knew. We lived in a 1-story house, I had a car when I turned 16. And he certainly always reminded me that I was well-to-do. However, when I went to TCU and parked in the freshman parking lot for the first time, in between 2 Hummers, brand new, that was a real wake up call to what real wealth was. And then the other side of that was, it was pretty much all white. And that was interesting to me because, just hanging out with other people who looked like me was not part of my growing up. It was something I had to learn, and something now I realize was just another symptom of my alcoholism. But, being kind of resentful about, like, do I belong here? And again, looking back, if I know what I know now, right, I would have made different choices about probably where I went to school and all those things, what I did with my time during college, how much I paid for it, all of those things. But really, what it ended up being was just another fast track for drugs and alcohol for me. Yeah.
Okay, so you're in college, and then when did things kind of sort of ramp up that kind of got you into recovery at some point?
Yeah, that's where they started. So the hardcore drinking started immediately. I'm not going to say anything that's going to surprise anybody. We have a culture of alcoholism in colleges in America. And the group that I ran with was, as far as I'm concerned, the number one seed. It was a badge of honor to see how rowdy you could get, how disgusting you could get, the stupidest things that you could do. In fact, there was there was an emphasis put on basically what kind of story you could have when we all met again. So who could one up the other?
Right.
And so certainly, things happened there. A couple of arrests for me in college, countless blackouts, many drunk driving incidents. And in college, I never really got in trouble for it, but there were more than a handful of times that I was pulled over and the police just like followed me home. I mean, which I can't even imagine happening now.
Right.
And probably shouldn't have happened back then. And that is one thing that, I know we're supposed to, work through guilt and shame in the program, but that's one thing that I really still struggle with is all my drunk driving. There's no good. Now there was not, as there was not when you were that age, Uber or Lyft.
Right.
So I think nowadays there's almost, and I don't know because I'm not a young person anymore, but there's almost kind of a social stigma against, like, why would you do that if you could just, you can get a ride?
Yeah, but what happens is, and this, is that your brain functions in a different way once you have the liquor in you. And for whatever reason, my brain was always attracted to a car, even though I knew going into it was not the right thing to do. But.
Yeah. So, and I'll try to wrap this part up, but all these run-ins, couple jail. My mom was sober, still is sober, and had been since I was a child. And
does she get sober through a program?
Yeah,
or does she,
through Alcoholics Anonymous. And I probably should have talked about that at the beginning. I was kind of, hearkening on the bad stuff. But my dad's father was a real bad drunk. Now, he's been sober now, too, for pretty much my entire life. But he carried all of those things. And in fact, he's told me more recently that he really believed as a dad, and this goes back to what we were talking about with my upbringing, but he believed as a dad, as long as he wasn't a drunk, he was going to be a great dad because of his experience with his father. My mom...
That was the bar.
Yeah. My mom, it really is interesting. I knew that she was sober. I didn't really know a ton about the program, except when I started getting into incidents, and especially in college, that stuff would come up, and she'd really come at me from an AA perspective, more so than necessarily a parent perspective.
And when you say, like, would you hear, like, the things in the program?
Well, yeah, let me tell you this. This goes back to even when I was a child, and I knew nothing of AA. Anytime something would happen at school, I'd get in a fight, or, I would get a bad grade or whatever. And even if the situation was totally not my fault. Every single time, the first thing she would say, "Now, Jake, what was your part?"
What was your part?
Yeah.
My kids hear that too.
And I couldn't stand it when I was a kid, but of course, it came back to me. And I do want to say that my parents, the bad things that happened when I was a kid are things that I carried all the way through my alcoholism, and they are part of my story. It's a real thing, and I don't like to keep bringing it up to make them feel bad about it or anything like that. There's been all the forgiveness that can happen has happened, but there was also really positive things that they taught me, and personal responsibility was one of them. Now, obviously, I wasn't learning that through alcohol and drinking. But for some reason, I picked up on the being a good friend and showing up on time and stuff like that. I was able to connect with, but as soon as the drinking got into it, then it was like, okay, your rules don't matter to me anymore. Anyways, when I was in college, I had one significant, after my probably second significant drinking incident, my parents said, "You have to go to AA. And if you don't go to AA, you're not going back to school. You got to go every day, and you got to get a sponsor, all those things." And I did.
Do you remember? Were you like a junior, senior at that time?
I was a junior. Yeah, I was a junior, and I did it. And I did it for 6 months. Now, I didn't give up on some of the other stuff, but I did give up on drinking.
Like the marijuana maintenance program.
Yes, and I did give up on drinking, and I really. Up to that point and even further after that point, what I learned from that was, I can get a little reboot if I need, I can, if I go too far down the tracks, I can go to a couple meetings and kind of sober up a little bit. And, but within 6 months after that, and I even kind of bought into some of the stuff at the program. I didn't get a sponsor. I wasn't working the steps. I was just going to meetings and not drinking. That was it. But I was also still in this cesspool of, just
all the people you were hanging around with.
College. I could have tried to run away from my friends, and I would have run right into somebody else. Yeah.
And the interesting thing is TCU is Texas Christian University, as you know.
Yes.
And I think it used to be a little bit more.
Maybe so, but it wasn't when I was there, and I still, hear some stories now. But basically, it did all come to a head in college, and somehow I found a way to graduate. I don't know how, but as college was winding down, I really got into painkillers, and this is kind of where everything ramps up.
Did it start out innocently in terms of taking them, or was it kind of more purposeful, if you will?
It was not innocent as in a doctor prescribed them to me and I took them. Right. But this story, and I think it's important because this is a story that's happening all over our country every day now.
Correct.
And I was kind of in the petri dish of this. I had taken painkillers before. I knew I liked them, but they weren't easy to get my hands on, etc. At one point, I was introduced to OxyContin, which is, for people who don't know, a very, very powerful painkiller. And you can read up on it and all the ways that it is different than your standard Vicodin or Percocet, but it is. And I really liked that stuff. And what I noticed with that was that, I don't want to go out and drink when I take this. I just want to sit on my couch and watch TV, and I can even study. I can go to class. I can't work out, and I eat really bad, so that's kind of the downside. But whatever, I'm feeling good here.
And it's mitigating some of the drunk driving.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, the irony was that anytime I'd be like, nah, I don't want to do that. I'll just go out with my friends and have a good time like I used to. Well, I'd have one drink, and then I'd be calling the pill dealer immediately. What do I need to do? Where do I need to go? Because I need it. And my experience was that went about a year of get my hands on them when I can. that drug is expensive as well, or was. I don't know where Oxycontin is today in the whole realm of things on the street, but used funds that were not supposed to be used for that. And thus so, it was not something that I could have every day. I kind of spread it out. And I looked up after a year of that, and I really wasn't, I don't think I could say that I was addicted to it. I didn't ever do it enough times in a row, but it was like a once a week, once every 2 weeks sort of thing that I really liked and really looked forward to, and had to kind of go through with some effort to get to. And eventually that day came, which comes to everyone who goes down this path. It happens for everyone. Unless you get out, this day will come. Where I couldn't find any of that. And, my friend, he started as my friend, but had become my dealer, said to me one day, he felt comfortable enough one day to say, well, if that's really the feeling you're looking for, then I've got something else you might want to try. And,
I've heard about this.
Yeah, and that was heroin. And so my final semester of college, spring semester of 2010, that would have been, is when I first tried heroin. Yeah.
What's your memory of that?
Well, I really liked it a lot. And, I've met people who have tried painkillers and didn't like it. Didn't like how they made them feel nauseous. I've never met anyone who tried something on the scale of heroin, of an opiate, who didn't like the feeling.
Right.
It is a powerful, powerful feeling. In fact, I'm going to misquote it, but there's a movie called Trainspotting with Ewan McGregor that Danny Boyle directed about heroin addicts. And his kind of opening salvo, Ewan McGregor's, is, everyone talks about, what life we're wasting and how we're hurting all these people and we're lazy and all these things. And what they don't understand is if they just tried it, they would know why we do the things we do, because it is an amazing feeling. And I really did enjoy it. It's much cheaper than really anything. And you can, if you're judicious, you can make it last. And I certainly could when I first started. I could really make it last. And I think probably within a month or two of the first time I tried it, and this was when I didn't have a bunch of school going on at the time. It was my last semester. I was doing a lot of school in Fort Worth. My dealer was in Dallas, so I would, drive to Dallas, meet him in some seedy place to grab the stuff, and then drive back to Fort Worth. And so there was some separation there, but around the time I was about to be done with school, I didn't know it at the time, but I realize now I experienced withdrawal for the first time.
What'd that feel like?
It was the first time. It was just a weird feeling, and I didn't know what it was. And again, I had put so many different things in my system at that point that I didn't know if I was just coming down with something. It coincided with my last final exams ever, so I had been taking some things to kind of keep me up, and so I had a lot of stuff going, but I started noticing like I was sweating and I was kind of getting the chills, and I was like, well, it's like, June, I don't think I have the flu. And I thought to myself, I had a job lined up back in Dallas once my exams were over and everything, so it was like, I'm going to go back home. I'm going to have to live with my dad. I better not mess with this stuff. And so I tried to hold out, and I actually made it about a week, but it was only a couple days from moving back home and starting my job that I was right back in it. Yeah.
Wow. So how long did that go on?
That went on until December 20th of 2011. So that went on, it was, luckily it was only a year and a half really. But it was, in that year and a half, I lived a junkie's life.
Yeah.
I don't know at what point anymore. I probably could have told you when I first got sober, but I didn't know for sure where it happened, where I knew that I was in deep. But it obviously happened. And along that train, a lot of things had happened. I got a DWI, and within all of the run-ins with the police, with drinking or otherwise that I had never had a DWI yet. And now I'm in the workforce, and I'm depended on to get places. I actually had to eat my stash that I had on me when I got pulled over.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, that was fun being in jail when that all finally took a head. But so that set me back a little bit. And...
just out of curiosity, I mean, now I am curious about
please.
that. So when you're in jail, you've eaten your stash, and that does it hit you in a different way than it normally would, or is it just all like on turbo, or what?
It's not as strong actually if you eat it like that, but the other thing is I was very drunk. I got a DWI, so right. I definitely got sick when I first got into the jail, and threw it up. So the bad part about that is that, I was in jail for about 19 hours. So if I had been able not to throw up, I might not have been getting the other sick by the time I was getting out of there. But, that's really the scary thing about the whole thing, is that from the second I got into the jail, the only thing on my mind was, how do I get out of here so I can get more heroin?
Right.
So there was just basically this long period where I was leaving in the middle of the day to go find my dealer. The real ritualistic part of it was that anytime I would get paid, I did not have a bank account anymore because there was money owed on that thing. And it was, now that looking back on it, it was like $500. It was something that I could have managed to get even on. But at the time, that was way too much money. And so I would literally get my paycheck on a Friday at noon. At this point, I had my car back, or I was driving illegally, one or the other. I had my license back, or I was driving illegally. I would drive all the way to a checks cashed place, way out of the way of where my office was. And I would go cash the check. And, I wasn't making a ton of money, but it was a full-time, paycheck. And got all of that in cash, put it in a wallet, and then drove all the way back over to this side of town where my dealer's house was. And this whole thing would just line up. And a lot of times I would, convince him to, hook me up before, because he knew payday was coming, and he would, and what it really all led to was the majority of my time, if I wasn't, at my workplace, would be spent at my dealer's heroin den, where there was no light coming in, where there was cigarette burns all over the floor. I mean, whatever you picture in your mind of a heroin den, right. That's exactly what it was. And it was me and him in this room, and that was my life. And that was really dark.
Right,
it was
kind of
really,
sad.
really
right.
dark. In fact, I remember one time, and remember, this guy was my friend before we were both in this together. And at this point, we're both just zombies, where there's no resemblance of the guys we were before.
Right.
And at one point I looked at him, and he was much further down the road than I was at the time. And I said, I'm an addict. Like, there's no way around this. I mean, I used to say to myself, we've talked, and we know people, we ourselves have probably said at one point, if I could only just like drink on the weekends,
right.
In my head, I was going, if I could only just use heroin on the weekends, then maybe I'd have this together, right. And after saying that to myself a few times, I was like, I don't think that's a line of thinking that's like really healthy, No. And if I'm thinking that way, then I probably got a problem. And so I was still in it, and I had realized that I had a problem. I was definitely an addict, and I'll stand aside here for a second to say that I've known a lot of people who have gone through this now, and it's really hard for people to get sober
right.
off of heroin. It's really hard. yeah, I just can't imagine. Anyways, I was in that room and I said, I'm an addict. Like, I can't imagine being a heroin addict and not knowing that you're an addict. Because once you go down that line, once you cross that line, I just don't know what headspace you have to be in to know that it's fun. Now, you'll talk to people who know that, who will do it knowingly, that they have to live with this. I mean, everyone goes through this. Anyways, I looked at him and I said, I'm an addict. And this is very morose, but I can laugh at it looking back. He looks over at me and he's got a syringe loaded up that he is about to inject into his neck because he had no veins left anywhere else.
Oh my goodness.
And he looks me dead in the eyes and he goes, "Speak for yourself." I know it's dark, but
a little heroin Dan humor, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, okay, yeah. So anyways,
how's he doing nowadays?
He's better now. I believe he's sober. Unfortunately, he lost his legs to this disease. So, I haven't, we've kind of talked, but I haven't seen him since that happened. But, yeah, so that, that lifestyle, lasted for a little while. I would have, bits and points where I would clean up for a week or two, mainly because I ran out of money and, had to dodge him because, and he always let me back, which was really interesting. But, I knew I was an addict. I knew that this was a real problem. And my efforts to quit on my own went nowhere. So I was basically at the place of, I knew that when I was off of it and I was sober, that I didn't want to live that life. Mm-hmm. And the place I got was that, I don't want to be a heroin addict, but I really don't want to be alive. So
how did you, okay, so let's go up to AA. So somehow you got to, were you familiar with AA through your mom? You look it up on the internet? How'd you get there?
Yeah, I had been to meetings in college when I'd had, bouts of, bouts of sobriety. And basically where it came to a head was my parents finally found out what I was doing. And
do you remember how they found out?
Well, yeah, because I was, I think they knew that something was terribly wrong. But because I was using it in both of their houses and I didn't have my own place to live. But eventually they just found my stuff, or found the remnants, and there's no denying what it was. And, basically from that, I had nowhere to go and I had no money. I had a full-time job, but no money and nowhere to live. And I remember the last $100 I had, I went to my dealers and I bought $50 in dope. And I left myself just enough to spend one night in the seediest motel that I could find. I wasn't looking for a seedy motel, but I was looking for one that would only charge me $50. Right. And I was laying there in that hotel room and I did my last batch. And, I don't think I knew that was the moment that I was going to get sober, but I certainly knew that was the lowest I had ever been. Mm-hmm. Family don't want to talk to me. They're convinced I'm going to die and that they can't do anything to help me. You got to realize my parents, though this was the darkest it had ever gotten and the furthest it had ever gone. They've had a lifetime of, trying to help me and seeing it not work. So I wouldn't say they gave up on me, but they certainly needed to see a lot more in order to help me. And so basically what happened was my mom, though she wasn't going to let me stay at her house, she gave me the number of a local rehabilitation clinic. outpatient. Mm-hmm. And really all I was going there for was a consult, just to, for someone to talk to me as you and I are talking, a professional, and give me an assessment, which I had then committed to give my mom the assessment. And at some point between that hotel room, and I think there might have been like a week in there where I wasn't using, and I was couch surfing and still going to my job. At some point in there, I thought to myself, and I still hadn't been to a meeting yet. At some point in there, I thought to myself, could I give this thing a shot? Could I see if I could fulfill my humanity, essentially? Could I just give this one last hurrah and throw myself into it and see if I could be happy, sober, and living whatever life came out of it? And it was when I went into that consult that the light kind of clicked on, and I said, you know what? I want to give this, I want to throw myself into this. I don't want to live this way. I don't know if I want to live long term, but I think I owe it to myself to see if I can do this. Mm-hmm. And what happened in that consult was, they, and the woman who I did the consult with, I'm still very close with today. She's an amazing woman. She still says today, and she'll tell anyone this, and I'm fine with her telling, we usually do not give heroin addicts any other option, but you're going to treatment somewhere far away where all your friends and distractions are way out of the way. And it was the first time she had recommended outpatient to, or I guess in that case, allowed outpatient to a heroin addict. And she said the reason was she could see the determination in my eyes. And I don't know where it came from, that's a God thing to me now, is what I look at it. And so anyways, basically my life became through that. It was outpatient, but I had a really strict schedule, and this is important. I learned regiment, which is very important in my sobriety days. Sorry, I'm doing the thing you told me not to. Bang on the table. And so my schedule was I would go do my job, and then I would go to this facility for treatment, which was really just a lot of discussion. It was very AA based. Mm-hmm. A lot of group discussion, group therapy. I would go there for 3 hours every night. So work, I would have to be there by 6 p.m., done at 9, and then I would go to the gym, because at this point, and you can see me now, the listeners can't, but I was 210 pounds.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I was really big and way out of shape. I looked terrible. I looked like a junkie, except I ate all the time, which was, a little bit different. And I would go to the gym, and I would not get home till, 11:30 at night. And I would shut off the lights and get up in the morning and do it all over again. So not only was I getting recovery, and meetings were part of this whole structure, where I found my home group. They actually take everyone to this place that I've become a home group. And through all this, I'm doing my job. I'm getting 3 hours of recovery every night. And then I'm following that up with exercise. Yeah. Which I definitely needed. And, I needed to get toxins out of my system. I need, all that stuff. And I left myself no room to go do anything else. Mm-hmm. And I mean, a lot of, I'll let you kind of play the host. I know I've been rambling, but a lot of great things have come from, that moment from, December 20th, which was my first day. I think I had been sober a couple, like I said, like maybe a week before, but that was the day I recognized as my sobriety day. It was the first day I was in there. And look, a lot of stuff happened during that time. My dad was not part of did not join me. My mom did. She would come in for the family nights and everything.
Had your dad just kind of lost faith?
Yeah, he had. like I said, we've reconciled.
I understand,
since.
right?
And you know what? I didn't blame him.
Right. I wouldn't either.
Yeah,
right.
I would have loved for him to be there. And sure, there was a couple times where I, kind of wish, but I also knew that, that was part of my determination too. I wanted to show him that I could do this and that I could be a contributing member of society. That was really as low as it had gotten, John. I wanted to just be another bozo on the bus, as we say. You know, my whole life I was so driven and stressed and burdened by not being average. And then by the time I was getting sober, all I wanted was to be average. That's the only thing in the world I wanted, was to be able to get up at a decent time in the morning and do my job and be able to, put money away and feed myself. It seems so basic.
Right.
And so many people around the world can do it, who have much bigger problems than I do. But it was so hard for me,
Just the normal day-to-day, like you said, bozo on the bus.
Yeah.
Be a worker among worker and a friend among friends.
Yeah.
Okay, so obviously you got sober then, and that's been like 7 years now.
Yeah.
Kind of take me through a run on your 7 years of sobriety, whatever you want to share about that.
Sure. Well, it hasn't been without its distractions, and obviously there've been bumpy roads. A lot of them came right within the time that I was first getting sober.
Welcome to the club, brother.
I know. My mom went through her heart transplant. During that period, during the first 6 months I was sober.
Wow.
I went through
a heart transplant.
Heart transplant, new heart.
My goodness.
Yeah, I went through some basically trials at my job that had come from my actions when I had been out. And you know what? Looking back, I doubt anybody really noticed or remembered that. I came up against strife because I've had such a great career since then. But yeah, for the first, people do 90 and 90. I did 180 and 180. And I took all those, stresses that went into doing everything else and I put them into the rooms, and I just made a commitment to, no matter what else was going on, I'm going to be at this meeting, Got a great sponsor, great people around me, just incredible. The rooms I stuck with and the ones I still go to today, there's no special enlightenment. They're just people that I trust and that I know work this thing every day, and they're not going to say anything edgewise about anybody else. They're good people. That's what I was looking for. I wanted good people in my life. I wanted people who could deal with life on life's terms and a calm. I say this when I tell my story now, and really pretty much every meeting I go to, that hole that I had. I don't know. Could I have known when I was 8 years old that hole could be filled by AA? I don't know. I don't even think you could have told me the first time I went into the rooms when I was 22 that it could have done that. But I never experienced true happiness, contentment, being content, peace. I never experienced peace until AA.
Right.
So even before I ever used a drink or a drug, I didn't know it at the time. I would have moments of elation or moments of joy, but I lived a manic life my entire life, ups and downs, never in the middle. And I always envied people who, could. I envied them somewhere, but I also, like I said, was driven to be larger than life.
Didn't want to fly under the radar.
Yeah,
you wanted to be noticed.
Exactly. And I have my bad days, certainly, and I've had more of them recently. And I talked to you about kind of why this is serendipitous that you and I are meeting right now.
Correct, yes.
I've probably been closer to the edge, and it's been 7 years over the past 3 months than I have been in 7 years.
Tell me about the edge. I think I know what you're talking about, but go ahead and describe that.
Well, I've experienced a lot of success in my career over the past 3 years, and that climb is continuing to happen, and I'm really grateful for that. But with that comes a lot more stress, responsibility. Most people, I think, are in a job where figures are a big thing, and you can be really weighted down by sort of the amount of money that is dependent on you to make everything go. And that's been kind of new. With that success comes new stressors that are, I always got to be on my A game. And I've worked hard my whole career, like really, really hard. And I've continued that regiment thing probably to an unhealthy degree, because I'm not going to a meeting every single night and having to go to 3 hours of recovery every single night, but I'm still driving myself to stay away from the distractions the same way. So that goes into work. Anyways, through all that, my mom's health has taken a really bad turn. And she has been, so basically she got the heart transplant that is just a couple months after I got sober. And essentially what happened is the medication to save her new heart destroyed her kidneys. Yeah. And she's been on dialysis for about 1.5 years now, and we knew that was going to be a thing, and we were learning to deal with that. And look, my mom's been having hospital visits my whole life, ER visits my whole life. So it's not a new thing when she goes in. It's not a surprise when she goes into the ER. Mm-hmm. She went into the ER on April 12th, and she has not been home. And so it's July as we're recording this. So she just can't stay healthy. There's not really any signs of getting on the transplant list at this point because she can't be healthy enough to. Every time we take a step forward, there's 2 steps back. And I'm not even, I'm living with a lot of guilt because I'm not spending that much time there. My sister just had a baby 4 months ago. Now she is a teacher, so she's off for the summer, so she has a little more time on her hands. But I'm sure she'd love to be devoting all of it to her newborn son, But she has that gear that I don't have. She has that caretaker gear. And God bless her. I'm so thankful to have her because she's managing all of this stuff and she's keeping the doctors honest and all those things. But, I'm preparing to go on this trip. I'm going to Europe tomorrow. I've never taken a vacation, ever.
Really?
No. The longest I've ever been gone is 1 work day. So I've taken lots of long weekends and stuff like that. Not even lots. I've taken a few long weekends and gone somewhere. But I've never in 8 years of being in the workforce taken a week off, 8 days off. I've never been to Europe. And it's been a lot of stress to get ready to go. In fact, logic would have told me not to come here today because I've got so much stuff to do. But what I've been experiencing with what's been going on with my mom and everything has been a good reminder of that time when I first got sober, when nothing was more important than getting to a meeting that day, And so that's why when we met and you said you had this time available, I said, I need to go do this. I need to go be there because, every time I go to the hospital, I'm breaking down. And that's really, I know it's not easy on my mom. I'm scared for her, but I'm also just really stressed out about being there for my family and being there for work and then going on this trip, which, I couldn't have known on April 12th that we'd still be going through this today.
Right.
But, I'm just, I'm in need of a lot of recovery right now. And I have been, taking more steps over the past couple weeks, which I'm really glad about. I had a group of guy friends that we all got sober at the same time, and it was so cool. Around the same time, there was a couple year differences here and there, but Such a cool thing. But life happens, and all of our lives are so different today than the way they were back then. And we don't see each other as much, and we still communicate, and luckily I have the right people in my life to keep me honest. But we are, I think kind of the interesting thing is like we're learning how to deal with these life things and work through the program together. And I wish I could say it was as easy as just showing up to that meeting every week when it's time to be there. But you know, we lose track of that sometimes.
That's right.
Yeah.
And we have to reboot.
Yeah.
And refresh.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, so is there, you know, to kind of wrap this up, is there anything in particular on your heart that you would like to impart on somebody who may be out there, a newcomer who's listening to this for the first time? They're trying to get sober. They think that they cannot do it. Just any words there that you want to?
Yeah, I'll say this. This is this is kind of something that I stumbled upon, and my friend who I was actually just describing, my friend Dan, gives me crap every time I say it because I say it like it's this brand new thing I came up with, but you know, I say it all the time really. But this is kind of the way that I reconcile everything in this program in sobriety is if a scientist came up to me and said, Jake, we have found a way to legitimately and definitively test whether or not you are an alcoholic and drug addict. So we're going to hook you up to this thing, and we're going to give you the results, and it's going to say definitively, like, are you or are you not an alcoholic or drug addict? And if it says you're not, then that means you can go find some way to drink or use regularly. You just didn't find it yet. I would decline the test because I don't really care if definitively I'm an alcoholic or drug addict. I believe that I am. I'm really quite sure of it. Because if the price that I have to pay for getting to live the life that I have now, this beautiful, beautiful life, all the stuff we just talked about, all that stuff that's weighing on me, every day is better than the days I had even before I ever took a drink. If the price I have to pay for that is I don't drink or use drugs, that is an easy and simple sacrifice to make every single day to get to have this life.
Yeah.
So I would say to anyone is if you don't think it can get any better and you don't think you can get sober, it is there and it can happen and it will happen. And if you can look at it in terms of what would you give for happiness? Are you happy right now? My guess is you're probably not. What would you give for that? And if you're willing to give up drinking or using, just take that first step. Just take that first step to admit you have that desire and walk into a room. Call somebody you know. I promise, just call someone that you know. I think you mentioned it before, like on one of your podcasts, like the 6 degrees of separation. Like you will find another alcoholic very quickly.
Right.
It's not going to be, you know, if you can take that first step and just focus on that one, then all the other stuff will come. It will. Don't you think so?
I think so, yes. Yeah, you just got to crack open that door, have willingness. And, you know, there's another book that I read. It says, seek and you shall find. And as long as you seek, as long as you're going in that direction, as long as you're knocking on the door, you will find something behind that door. You will find what you're looking for. But it's a matter of moving in that particular direction that you need.
Yeah.
God bless you, Jake.
Thank you for having me, John. I appreciate it.
Hey, listen, prayers for your mom.
Thank you.
And I know that's got to be a difficult time. I know I'll be saying a prayer for her tonight.
Thank you.
And in terms of your European vacation, let's try to have a good time. And maybe you'll have another Chevy Chase European vacation movie by the time you get back.
I hope it goes. I hope there's less There's less follies than that one.
Well, Jake S., thank you for stopping in once again. I want to thank you. And for those of you who are interested in it, please go to our website, soberspeak.com. Your support is much appreciated. We welcome your thoughts and feedback. We would love to hear from you. Please contact us at feedback@soberspeak.com. And I'm going to end it here with page 164 from the Big Book. And it says, abandon yourself to God as you understand God. Admit your faults to Him and to your fellows. Clear away the wreckage of your past. Give freely of what you find and join us. We shall be with you in the fellowship of the Spirit, and you will surely meet some of us as you trudge the road of happy destiny. May God bless you and keep you until then. Once again, Mr. Jake S., thank you for stopping in.
Thank you.